Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar, Driving the Future of Recycled Parts, proudly hosted in partnership between MTA New South Wales and eBay. For those of you who do not know my face, my name is Jason Steporowski and I'm the General Manager of Membership here at the Motor Traders Association in New South Wales. I've seen some familiar names in the RSVP list, so I extend a particularly warm welcome to the valued members of MTA New South Wales, and obviously your contribution and continued support make initiatives such as this always possible. For those of you who do not know what we do or are not familiar with us, MTA New South Wales has been an integral part of the automotive industry since 1910. And not only do we amplify the voice of the automotive sector, but we offer daily value and protection for our members and help them stay ahead of an industry that's in a state of constant evolution. Today's session with eBay reflects exactly that. We're exploring innovation, sustainability, and new opportunities in this circular economy of automotive parts. It's an exciting space, and I'm looking forward to the insights our very learned guest speakers, Gary Taluja from eBay and Chris Douglas from APS, Auto Partnered Solutions, and I'm looking forward to what they'll be sharing. So on that note, I'm going to pass on to Kurt, our friend and collaborator of New South Wales, who'll take us through today's discussion. Kurt, over to you.
Thanks, Jason. Look, just also want to convey my thanks for everyone for joining today. I think this will be a really sort of interesting session. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Kurt McGuinness. I've been fortunate enough to have worked in the auto industry for about 20 years now. I've been a car journalist for Top Gear and Wheels and Hot Fours. I've done a decade in head office in communications at Volkswagen Group Australia. I've sat on the board of the Electric Vehicle Council, and I've seen, like many of you, I've seen a lot of changes happening in our industry, particularly in the last few years. We're seeing more brands, more technology come available, and I guess more consumer changes as well in terms of what buyers are looking for and how we're using vehicles to get around. So this discussion has been really sort of interesting. I now obviously work for the MTA as one of their partners in producing MTA magazine, so I edit and publish that on behalf of MTA. And I also get to work with the guys at eBay as well. So this is kind of a bit of a perfect marriage for me. Today we'll be having a bit of a chat about some really interesting sort of research that the guys at eBay and Auto Partnered Solutions have done in collaboration as well with YouGov. So as Jason mentioned, we've got Gary, who is the category manager for parts and accessories at eBay. And then we've got Chris Douglas, who's managing director at APS. Between these two guys, there's probably nothing worth not knowing about the parts and accessories business, particularly in this space. So I'm really looking forward to getting into it. And without further ado, let's just do that. So jumping into, I guess, as a former journo, my favorite question of all time is why. And I think it's really important to kind of understand why eBay and APS have sort of embarked on this study. So, I mean, obviously, hopefully many of you are using the eBay platform for your businesses, or if you're like me, you buy things that your wife isn't terribly happy about when you get a box in the mail. But that's beside the point. But we should all know and use eBay fairly regularly. It is actually the #1 place where Aussies buy parts and accessories online. And obviously eBay plays a major part in the automotive parts and accessory space, and has done for quite some time. And as mentioned, the guys at eBay and APS recently partnered with YouGov as well to conduct a study, and they've unveiled that cost and convenience benefits are two of the main sort of things that have popped up for consumers when choosing recycled parts over new equivalent parts. And that's going to be sort of a key sort of point of distinction there for today's discussion. And speaking of which, let's get straight into it. I'll start off with a question for Gary. I guess why did eBay decide to sort of embark on this journey of doing a study with APS and YouGov, and I guess why is the parts and accessory space so important for eBay?
Thanks for the question, Kurt. I think as a market leader, we have seen industry trends that are sort of, I would, in simple words, if I put it, we are at a sort of pivotal point where cost saving, environmental benefit, as well as the consumer behavior are aligning. And this is the trend that sort of instigated us or pushed us to get into this cost saving research and the environmental benefit research around the recycle parts. So the surprising fact is that about when we did the research, about 8 out of 10 Aussies who were interviewed, they were open to buying recycle parts, which is a big number. And this is the exact trend that I was talking about, is how we are seeing this industry and how we are seeing the shift happen within this industry. And I think the one point that stood out for me was 64% of them actually cited as cost saving as their biggest motivator to move to the recycle parts. So all these numbers, like I was saying, we are at that point where all these factors matter a lot.
Yeah, of course. I mean, obviously eBay has sort of been in this space for quite some time. I mean, is it safe to say that it's a major focus for the business?
Absolutely. Like I said, we are moving with the trend. We don't want to swim against the trend and face headwinds there. But I think that's where our support for within this industry is coming, and how we are supporting this in different ways is spacing out.
Thanks, Gary. Okay, so we're all in business. We sort of I guess we all have our different sort of corners of the industry here, but this big part of today's discussion is around this recycled parts opportunity and what that actually means for the industry and for our businesses as well. I just want to jump into some of these sort of key statistics here. So, I mean, one of the ones that's been identified is that there is up to an 85% saving by opting for recycled parts of vehicles between 7 and 13 years old, which is quite significant, obviously. 82% of vehicle owners are already open to shopping for recycled auto parts. And as Gary mentioned, 64% are citing cost savings as key. We all know that we're in the middle of a cost of living crisis. And as we will sort of touch on soon, this whole idea of recycled parts is not just around meeting some of those kind of key considerations around sustainability and parts quality. It's also a key way for consumers to save money and obviously for businesses to generate profit for themselves as well. And perhaps bringing it back down to a more granular level, Australians could save on average, $2,144 per driver over 5 years with just using recycled parts. Pretty sort of considerate sort of savings and figures there. And I might actually throw over to Chris now. Let's talk a little bit about the data in general, and I guess, can you just sort of fill us in on the methodology and the science behind APS's involvement in this study and what was involved?
Sure, thanks for that. And look, thanks for having me on. I think one of the key things I want to point out here, looking at some of the people that are joining the session as attendees, is that this is relevant not only to Australia, but it's relevant globally. We've got people from Canada, the US, the UK on the call, listening into what we've done over there. Looking at the methodology around, assessing the savings opportunity, what we did there is we took a fairly extensive view of the top 10 models, top 10 part types for each of those models between a 7 and 13-year-old vehicle. Obviously, newer model vehicles, and this is changing. I mean, the usage of recycled parts is broadening more and more. So it's not as if it's only on older vehicles that people are looking for parts. But really, if you look at the bell curve of demand, it's probably in that 7 to 13 or 15-year-old vehicle traditionally. So we looked at those and we said, for those top 10 selling makes and models in Australia, during that period of time, for the top 10 part types, and that's looking at both mechanical components and collision components. I think that's a really important piece here. We looked at what the new prices were, and we looked at, on average, across 10 part types, 10 examples of each of those 10 part types, what the average selling price was of a recycled part compared to the OE dealer price to determine what the potential savings are. And there's no doubt in the mechanical side of things, the savings opportunity is greater. But that said, you're still looking at an average saving of over 50%, if you like, for collision parts. You know, the sheet metal, the hoods, the bonnets, and doors, etc., door mirrors.
Are there any sort of other key insights that you sort of want to call out, or were there any sort of surprises in the data, I guess, when you undertook this study?
I think one of the main things in talking to different people in the industry to look at the data and look at the information coming through is the level of fragmentation that exists not only in the automotive recycling industry. And I know everyone puts their hand up and says, well, the automotive recycling industry is quite fragmented. It is to a degree, but at the same time, there's a level of sophistication in the industry that a lot of us don't fully understand or fully realize. But in the new parts industry, availability was a big challenge, and we were speaking with multiple dealerships across the country, from east to west, north to south, and looking for different part types, and you're getting a different answer on a OE new genuine part from a dealer, from different dealers. And it's like, so what's the right price here? So we had to really work hard at understanding what that recommended retail or dealer list price is, because different dealers are giving different numbers out, right? Obviously, there's an element of competition there, and everyone wants to get their piece of the pie. But I think that was really, so the price variance was interesting. The availability was a big thing. So we're just looking here. We haven't done a lot of work around, well, you can save up to X, and at the same time, that's only available on the parts that you can actually buy, because there were a lot of parts that were not available. I'd say, if I was going to take a guess at between 10 to 20% of the parts that we actually requested were either on back order or no longer available, or not sure when it's going to come, or ex Japan, ex Germany, whatever the case may be there. So that in itself is a big opportunity for the consumer. But if we bring it back to a lot of your members, Kurt and Jason, it really is about, from a collision repair perspective, and it's not only in Australia, this is true everywhere. From a collision repair perspective, they can't finish a repair without the parts. And ultimately, they can't get paid for that repair from the insurer without the parts. They've already put 90% of the parts on a vehicle, and they're waiting for one part. Well, if I can't finish the job, I can't bill it out to the insurer. I've paid for all of the parts that I have received, and now I'm stuck with this situation where I'm waiting for one part and my cash flow gets thrown out. From an insurer perspective, we've got, key-to-key times or cycle time challenges, right? When do you drop the car off, Mr. Policyholder or Mrs. Policyholder, and when do you pick the car up? That measurement there is a really, really critical measurement from an insurer's perspective, because the longer that vehicle stays in the repair process, it costs them a lot more money in hire cars and managing that claim. So there's a whole heap of benefits beyond just the basic cost benefit here. There are a lot of other benefits that come through.
I mean, it's definitely, sort of more than, well, pardon the pun, it's more than the sum of its parts. I mean, and this is actually leading into sort of our next sort of point. So for those of you watching today, we're perhaps a little bit rehearsed with this, because we have actually done a live chat on this very topic not that long ago, and the photo that you're seeing now is some of the parts that were sort of on display, and I challenge any of you to sort of spot the difference between the pre-owned recycled parts and the new parts. And this is certainly something that formed part of this study, was that a lot of consumers couldn't actually spot the difference between the recycled parts and the new parts. And I guess that in itself is probably a really, really good thing, but also then leads the question around sort of education and sort of understanding for consumers. Question for Gary, and look, as I've sort of mentioned, I've worked in OEM land for a decade. I know about the endless sort of cycle of moving metal and focusing on monthly sales targets and yearly sales targets. Obviously that's a huge focus, but do you think that for owners with older cars that are outside of sort of new vehicle warranty periods, and obviously those warranty periods are getting longer and longer as well, but do you think that owners of those older sort of vehicles are being kind of forgotten in this current sort of market push for new vehicles and dare I say it, new brands as well?
Yes, I like, according to me, yes, certainly. I think, and I'm not blaming dealerships or the car manufacturers here, but I think naturally their narrative leans very heavily on moving new cars. And when that phase is happening, what happens is that the older car, especially the 7 to 13-year-old car, is forgotten. And that's where people who have those cars, and we forget that majority of Aussies actually have an older car rather than a newer car. And that is when the challenges start happening in terms of availability of the product, the pricing of the product. And sometimes when you look at buying an OEM part and compare it to the age of the car, sometimes the OEM part, new OEM part, is more expensive as compared to the depreciated value of the car. So considering all those points, I think that's why I think it is so important for, and like I said, the trend is strongly indicating that consumers are becoming more aware in terms of what to buy, when to buy, and how to buy. So that's where I stand. And one, like one of your previous slides actually said that an Aussie can save up to just over $2,100 over 5 years. So when you actually extrapolate that number according to the total population, what we are talking about is saving up to $15.5 billion over 5 years. That's a very significant number looking at just the car
Sure.
sales and part sales in Australia.
I think,
Yeah,
Kurt, if I
absolutely.
could, are you happy for me to jump in, Kurt, or do you want to?
Please do, yeah.
Yeah. So one of the things, again, bringing it back to the commercial world as to how things work. Look, the reality is that the car park is aging. Okay, whenever there's any uncertainty in the market around, there's wars on, or the economy is a bit funny, or what's happening with interest rates and so forth. If things aren't going great in that part of the economy, we have a situation where people tend to defer their spending on new cars a little bit, right? And what we're seeing globally is a aging of the car park. So the average age of a vehicle now is probably closer to 12 years old, and probably it's come off a low of 9 years. So we're looking at vehicles there that need repair. Okay, so this is where the challenge for the policy or the consumer is that if I need parts for this 10, 12, 15-year-old vehicle, what do I do? Where do I go? How do I find them? And there's less and less being carried by the vehicle manufacturers. And again, this is just a generalization here, but the reality is to hold parts for that long is a very, very expensive process. So I think there's a great opportunity here. And these are some of the discussions I've had in the US and Canada with the folk there. And that is that there's a great opportunity here for us to find a balance between the mix of parts that need to be used in the repair of a vehicle. It doesn't all have to be new. It doesn't all have to be aftermarket. It doesn't all have to be reused. I think there's a place for each of those. And the better the mix of parts, the better that balance, the more effective the repair will be, the more cost effective, the more vehicles will be repaired. And ultimately, whether it's an insurer paying the bill or the consumer paying the bill, ultimately it's going to be a more cost effective outcome. Okay, so I think that's something we can't ignore, and it's certainly something that is at the forefront of my discussions in different parts of the world when we're talking about how do we present recycled original equipment parts. That's the other thing, the recycled original equipment, right? ROE parts. How do we present those to the market in such a way that that they're embraced, right, as opposed to pushed away? Because I think there's benefits to all stakeholders if we do that, commercial and environmental.
Well, I mean, look, that leads us on to the next part of our presentation.
Sorry.
I told you I told you we were rehearsed.
Chris likes to take a bit of spotlight, but let me take it away from Chris for some time. But I mean, just saying that, when we're talking about moving new metal, and I think probably I'm taking some stage time from you also, Kurt. The way the link that you shared about the article, specifically about EVs, I think that's a very important one to mention here, is because Now, like you said, it's as good as it's as comparable as an iPhone. So you can only have it for like 4 years. And one of the examples is the full self-driving software that Tesla's launched. So it is only now valid for HW4, and they're thinking of doing it for HW3. So all these things, and considering that how businesses are leaning so much on moving new metal, moving new software within this industry, it's moving at an incredible pace. And that is why reliance on recycled parts, especially for aged fleet, I think it's getting more and more relevant.
So just for everyone watching, the story that Gary's referring to was actually a piece that I read this morning in the Atlantic, that actually was surmising that electric vehicles over, in the coming years, short to mid-term, will actually have similar life cycles to smartphones. Which means that the drive to obsolescence for some of that technology is accelerating quite rapidly. Obviously, there's a lot that has to happen before that occurs, but just very, very interesting that that's kind of the discussion that's taking place at the moment. So I might keep rolling here. So as we've touched on, there is a need, greater focus on recycled parts. And this is kind of the reason for it. This is from the FCAI, but every year approximately 850,000 vehicles are reaching the end of their life in Australia, which then means that we're generating 1.36 million tons of auto waste every year. So this is a big one, and as an industry, this is something that we need to be cognizant of as well, because as we've spoken about, it's not just governments and industry bodies that are sort of looking at this. Consumers are aware of it too. So I guess, throwing over to Chris, given your role in the parts space, I mean, a business is finding that buyers are looking at recycled parts mainly because of scarcity and price, or do you think that they're starting to wake up to more of the sustainability concerns that sort of come with, I guess, just general consumerism? How is that sort of playing out in this space?
Yeah, look, I mean, there's a whole heap of reasons. There's the availability issue, there's the cost issue, but there is the awareness issue as well, right? So I've got two young kids, 25 and 23, and there's certainly they have a tendency to look at more environmentally friendly sort of solutions with their purchases, in whatever they're looking to buy. Traditionally we used to say the only green that used to matter was the greenback. Well, that's changing a little bit. It's certainly a key factor. We need to make sure that commercially it works. And this is where the study that we've done and the studies that I've done previously in previous times with insurers in different parts of the world for the collision repair sector indicate that there's a great opportunity here for the industry to become net zero, for the industry to become more effective as far as the cost to repair is, as far as that's concerned, to repair more vehicles and therefore have more vehicles in the repair shops, which is good for them. And ultimately, 80% of policyholders want their car back. Generally speaking, people don't want to go out and start shopping for a new car, and insurers want to get their car back because if they can do that, get the car back in its pre-accident condition or better, and make the customer happy, give the customer a great experience, then the reality is that they're reinsuring with them, right? So there's a whole heap of reasons, but from a consumer perspective, the key drivers here are cost, availability, and service. And if we can get that right for the industry, and this is where I think eBay's platform makes it easy, it gives them that element of, people trust it. There are buy guarantees and seller guarantees and so on. So that helps the uptake of recycled parts, if you like.
I mean, speaking of which, whether we're talking internal combustion or EVs or plug-in hybrids or whatever, parts complexity is a big sort of consideration, particularly from where consumers are concerned. I mean, do you think that there's an education piece that's missing with sellers to sort of help educate consumers in terms of, that parts complexity?
Yeah, sure. And, you could argue whose role is that? Ultimately, the person selling the part has a role to play with it, so that the sellers do have a role to play. But there's a general sort of industry-wide, the MTAs of the world, the Auto Parts Recyclers Association of Australia. I know the Auto Recyclers Association in the US and the Ontario Auto Recyclers Association in Canada. VRA in the UK, they've all engaged with the different stakeholders out there, some more than others. So they have all engaged and they've started that education process, because we're at the point now where we can educate more readily and, you know, easier, right, with technology and social media and so forth. So it will take a little bit of time, but at the same time, we've all got a role to play. You know, we get up in the morning, we look in the mirror, that person that you're looking at has a role to play. And I often talk to the individual sellers about that and say, well, don't wait for the association to do something for you. Don't wait for this group to do something for you or eBay to do something for you. Everyone's doing their bit. You've got a role to play as well. Make sure your product looks good, it works well, it gets there on time whenever you said it's going to get there. You don't have to deliver it super quick. You just need to deliver it when you tell them and agree to deliver it, right? That's all people expect. And make sure if there's ever any issue with it, that it's dealt with. All right. So I think if we look at it like that, things can change pretty rapidly.
That's a
So
really,
Kurt,
really
can
good
I
point.
jump in here? Because I think it's
Please.
very important for me to explain eBay's role in this education piece. And this is where what we like to call fitment comes into play, where we are trying to make stronger indications for buyers to actually get confidence in purchasing that part, just by looking at something called if it fits their vehicle. And what it basically is doing is assuring the buyer with the make, model, year that they have, that part will be assuredly fit. And if something goes wrong, we have buyer protections to help them and protect them. So this is what I feel that as a leading marketplace, we are trying to do. Of course, it's work in progress, because like Chris said, every day there is some work that has to be done and there's something that has to improve. So we are continuously investing in it from our end in terms of educating buyers, and sellers do have a big role to play in terms of having that data added to the listings. So I think as an industry, we need to work together in the educational piece where we have to support each other.
I mean, it's a really good point. I mean, for any of you sort of watching, you know, the webinar now, that maybe be reading MTA magazine. I mean, I write about my my misadventures in the auto world quite regularly, and one of the things was around I've got a bit of a passion project at the moment where I'm trying to find an old car, and obviously the benefit at the moment is that I can actually now sort of start to work on an old car, because I don't need to sort of rely on in-person activities and, you know, service books and things like that, because everything's sort of at your fingertips thanks to social media and and my very good friends in the auto industry in front of me. So but you know, really good points, guys. And look, I'll sort of jump into the next one, because we have sort of just touched on it a little bit as well, is part scarcity, which obviously is something that I think we are really only sort of at the tip of the iceberg with, particularly given that we've seen the end of local manufacturing as well. I think that this is sort of something that is going to become even more prevalent in time. This is, you know, from the study, 49% of Aussies have needed to find a specific part, but it was either no longer manufactured or it was hard to source through a traditional retailer. And I think that number is definitely going to sort of increase. And I did say that I wear a lot of different hats. I did actually work on this study with the Australian Motor Heritage Foundation last year, where the AMHF actually went and contacted basically as many car clubs as they possibly could, and they got thousands and thousands of respondents, just in terms of what they spent their money on in their cars, and, you know, upkeep and you know, club registrations and all that sort of stuff. And through an official sort of financial modeling, it actually equated to over $10 billion to the economy every year. And so that, and you know, that's sort of considered the enthusiast market. So I mean, we're not talking sort of small numbers here. Gary, I guess, you know, jumping into sort of, you're looking at parts, and you've kind of spoken a little bit about this already, but from the research, I mean, are there certain sort of recycled parts that potentially have, I guess, the biggest opportunity for buyers and sellers?
Yeah, so I think when we talk about parts, we are talking about thousands and thousands of parts. But from the study, what we have seen is that engines, transmissions, and differentials, why I chose these, because it has benefit for both the buyer and the seller as well. From the buyer's perspective, a buyer is saving up to 85% of the cost compared to a new OEM. So that is why, of course, when a buyer is saving so much money, there's a huge potential and upside to it. But from a seller's perspective, I think these are the big ticket items. So to have them liquidated on a platform like eBay, connecting them to millions of users across the globe, I think that is very significant. And that is the importance as eBay or a marketplace that we play within this industry.
What about sort of, I mean, we've spoken a lot about sort of older vehicles and owners and their owners, but what about those vehicles that aren't necessarily, considered older and newer vehicles? Are we starting to see, from the study that savvy buyers are actually starting to sort of look at, recycled parts as a good way to kind of, I guess, still get high quality parts for their vehicles, but obviously keep the cost down?
100%. That is what at least I have seen through the results from the survey as well. So I think 2/3 of the Aussies who own a new vehicle. So when I say new vehicle, my definition of a new vehicle, and please, I might be wrong here, is any vehicle less than 5 years old or under 5 years. That's probably a new vehicle. And 2/3 of the Aussies who owned a new vehicle actually prefer to go with a recycled part. And the reasons remain the same that we have discussed: the availability, the cost saving, and the environmental benefit that they are seeing. And I know you previously asked, Chris, is there a sort of a change in notion about environmental factors that are affecting? So from the study itself, about, again, same numbers, 2/3 of the Australians who were surveyed, the whole survey audience, I would say, did actually agree that like using a recycled original part actually has a positive impact on environment. So I think the savvy buyers are trying to tick all the boxes in terms of what they need and being more conscious about their pocket as well.
I mean, it's quite interesting. I mean, I'm sure that, a number of our sort of viewers today or attendees today would be familiar with the OEM sort of push around genuine is best and, original manufactured equipment, having sort of higher tolerances and all those kind of things. It actually, in a way, is kind of creating the case for recycled parts, because recycled OE parts have those sort of theoretically, those higher thresholds and stuff. So from a recycled perspective, you're still getting that same sort of quality, but obviously at a lower price point. I mean, that's kind of, I guess, probably for another day, but an interesting sort of part of the debate. So look, let's sort of just toddle on. So let's take a look at things into the future. So future outlook for recycled parts, and I think the whole purpose of today is for all of us to sort of come together as an industry and sort of talk about the opportunities and some of the things that are worth sort of discussing and debating. From the study, the majority of those that were surveyed, drivers are actually open to purchasing recycled parts. So that's kind of half the discussion already. There is that there is actually an openness to these sort of products. 62% of drivers have purchased or considered purchasing auto parts in the last 2 years. So that's sort of an interesting kind of one, and would also incorporate some of those newer vehicles as well. And as an industry, we have that opportunity to drive, I guess, substantial value for consumers, but also looking at some of those environmental challenges. And I know that it doesn't really matter what part of the automotive industry that we work in, those questions are still sort of being asked, and those kind of challenges are still being set. Whether it's in VES or even just sort of in terms of how we dispose of things and things like that. These are all kind of really, really sort of key topics. Chris, I'm going to sort of throw over to you now. Obviously, all the talk in the industry is around electric vehicles, as they should be, because they're quite significant technologies and quite a big shift in terms of what we do as an industry. But obviously, there's a lot of sort of questions around the environmental or the impact of electric vehicle batteries and things like that. We've seen sort of examples of manufacturers actually finding different purposes for electric vehicle batteries after they're no longer usable for cars themselves. They can be used for generators and things like that. Do you think from a parts perspective that we will see more of that coming, or do we need to sort of wait for those kind of electric vehicles to get closer to their sort of end of life before we really start to see that side of things ramp up?
Sure, yeah. Look, I think the key here is that there will always be different things that will change in our industry, right? So electric vehicles is a big thing. 30 years ago we had electronic fuel injection, replacing the carburetor and all that type of stuff, and computers starting to become part of the modern day vehicle. We've seen that change accelerate significantly, as we know, over the past 5 years, and will continue to accelerate significantly. I use a term or a bit of a saying that, change is faster than it's ever been today. And today, the change is never going to be as slow as it is today, right? So it's changing really fast, but tomorrow is going to change even faster. So we know that. Now, the reality is with EVs and batteries, we're not at that point, that tipping point or the critical mass point, if you like, especially in Australia because of the size of the country and our population. But we're still not at that point where there's often a commercial argument for the purchase and dismantling of electric vehicles. Okay, it's arguable, it's still at this stage. But I think there is certainly a case for reuse at some point in time. Okay, so not all electric vehicles will be dealt with just because they reach their end of life. A lot of electric vehicles will be dealt with because they've been written off, right? The car's been hit in the front, airbags have gone off, it's written off, but it's got a perfectly good battery in it. The challenge the industry has, and for example, the eBays of the world have at this point in time, is that the technology being used in vehicles today, how do we test that, for example? How do we know it's good? The engine, we could start it and we could hear it running 99% of the time. You can test if it's good or bad or otherwise. But how do we test the battery? How do we do those types? How do we guarantee that that battery will be in the right condition moving forward? I don't think we've actually solved for that yet. But we're working towards it. Again, working in different parts of the automotive recycling industry are working very hard at that to find that solution, because there will be another market for those batteries within the automotive. That is, there's a vehicle that's got a damaged battery here, or it's a taxi and it's, the batteries run out of life or whatever the case is. I don't know. And I've got a reused battery that's come out of, I've harvested out of a vehicle that's only done 20,000 miles, and that can now be put back into that other one as a replacement. So I think there will be a big case for that. And there will also be a big case for the actual raw material extraction, okay, the recycling of that, because there's a lot of raw materials within those batteries that I think will do a better job at moving forward. So hopefully that answers your question, Kurt. But while I'm talking, I'd like to suggest to the participants as well, and I can see a lot of the people on there, don't forget to put some questions in. If you've got questions that you want answered or comments you'd like to make, throw them in the Q&A, please. Sorry, over to you, Kurt.
No, it's a good point, Chris. And the other thing that I should also flag is that we will look to run some of these questions in the upcoming issue of MTA as well. So good, really, really good point. Speaking about sort of these, look, the electric vehicle sort of industry in particular is a very interesting and very exciting time for all of us. But I guess one of the things that many, many corners of the market have sort of discovered is that there is sort of still that fear of unknown. And, where we've sort of obviously we've seen it with things like range anxiety, because nobody sort of understands how far a battery level will go until you actually sort of conk out. But also just in terms of the technology is new, and, if it's your first time with an electric vehicle, there's a lot to sort of get on board with. Do you think that there is sort of a greater need for trust with sort of, when we're talking about parts recyclers and stuff in this space? Do you think that trust is probably, one of the most paramount things in this for sellers to sort of, engage with consumers?
Is that a question for me or for Gary?
Actually, look, it's probably, I'll put it to you first, but I actually would be keen to see what Gary thinks as well.
100%. There is no doubt that trust is probably the major piece here. Trust and education. a lot of people still don't know what the automotive recycling industry does, and they're a very, very important part of the ecosystem that they play a role in, right? I don't have the numbers off the top of my head. There's a few people on this session now that may well have it, and if you do, please put it in the Q&A or the comment section. But certainly, there's a huge opportunity there if we can build better trust with the industry. And I know one of the ways we can do that is to elevate I suppose the credibility of the automotive recycling industry. It's a very, very professional industry these days. You know, I mean, that's a generalization. You still got the great operators and the not so good operators, but you know, that's part of the deal. How do we differentiate? One of the ways to do that is through potentially a certification program. And if you meet these certain standards as an automotive recycler, then we know you're doing the right things environmentally. We know you're doing the right things, work health and safety, quality grading, a whole heap of different things that go into a certification program, such as that we built in the UK with the VRA there, such as the one that Shannon and the team at ARA are building here in the US, or have built and continue to sort of expand on. There are a lot of opportunities to do things better and to promote those that do the right thing. Okay, and I think that all leads to trust. The more trust we can build with the consumer, the better the outcome will be.
Thanks, Chris. What about from an eBay perspective, Gary? Anything to add?
Oh, 100%. I think as a marketplace, we do acknowledge trust plays a very, very big role, especially when we are talking about the used parts, used recycled parts, used original equipments. And often you sort of have a roadblock in how do I make buyers come onto eBay and motivate them to buy a recycled OEM part, because currently on eBay, we have aftermarket, we have OEMs, we have all different types of products available for the buyers to purchase. So I think some of the things that we have acknowledged and have worked towards is that we have this year launched a trust signal called Pro Recycler Badge. There's a criteria that we have, and I will ask someone from the eBay team to actually share the criteria how you can get the Pro Recycler Badge. So sellers, if they qualify and tick all the boxes there, we apply the Pro Recycler Badge on them, which is, again, it is pointing towards it's a strong indicator and strong trust signal for the buyers to actually complete the purchase without hassle. And some of the criterias are basic criterias like warranty, like not having or having a correct description, providing that extra customer service to them after sales service, I would say. So I think those are the basic criterias that we have. Not rocket science here, very honestly. And I think and sellers are, what I have seen at least, is that from when we started to now, there are a lot more sellers who have qualified for the badge. So I am getting more confidence within the industry that they are doing the right thing by the buyers. So that's a very strong indicator. And like the second part, I think as eBay, we are a very strong advocate for what just Chris mentioned, that we could think about a certification program. And we are in full support of that, because I think we are at a tipping point where we need sort of a standardized program within this industry. And it is also, I feel, an acknowledgement for the yards and the sellers or the businesses that are following and doing the right thing, to put them apart from someone who's not doing the right thing. So that's where we stand as eBay.
Guys, we're actually sort of just about out of time, but just very, very quickly before I hand back to Jason, if you could give one tip to somebody looking to sort of either get into the recycle parts sort of sector, I guess, or start recycling parts or start using parts for the first time, what would your one tip be? Chris, go for it.
Well, interesting question. So for those that are looking to sell recycled parts, be professional. Be professional. Describe the parts the way they need to be described. Deliver the product when you agree on that delivery, and make sure you understand the product that you're selling. for those that are looking to buy recycled parts, look out for the high quality certified recyclers, whether in Australia have that pro badge, in other parts of the world are certified to some kind of level, and talk to them. I think that's the opportunity here for the collision repair industry. It's traditionally been a little bit reticent to use a recycled part. I think things are changing, so embrace that change. And let's all get more involved in these types of discussions at different conferences that we have independently as recyclers and collision repairers have as collision repairers. Let's get more involved. Sorry, you asked me for one, but I gave you a few.
That's good. Gary?
I think the biggest takeaways from this would be, I think for buyers, look for the trust signals, the trust badges that we have launched. It is there to help you. It is there to support you. Make sure that you are looking for the part that you're looking for. You add your vehicle in it, because it also is a very strong indicator where you can see whether it fits your car or not. If it's not, then no point of buying and doing a return, because it's just extra work out there. And I think for sellers, it's, for me, the biggest takeaway is that it's never too late to start your eBay journey. What you need to do is the basic stuff, and it is a good introduction to e-commerce side for your business, because we do have millions of buyers coming onto eBay, purchasing things, purchasing parts, and we have built a reputation and the confidence within the buyer community that we have. So that would be my takeaway.
Brilliant. Gentlemen, I really appreciate your time. I think it's been a fascinating conversation, and it's nice to sort of see the different sides of the industry at play here as well. So thank you both for your time. And to all of you watching, thank you for joining us. As we've sort of mentioned, these questions, we will sort of get back to you with your questions, and we'll also sort of run them, or some of them in the magazine. And also, I'm going to dob Gary in right now. Gary has actually made himself available for further questions. So thank you very much. I'll hand back over to Jason.
Thank you very much again, speakers. That was wonderful. And again, we come from such a varied industry that it's rare that we have a universal factor that we're discussing. Replacement parts is that factor that touches everybody, I guess, across the gamut. And the two other factors, trust and expertise, key considerations for customers, regardless of what sector of the industry you undertake. Thank you very much for your time. It was very good to see a varied group of people who've attended this session. And again, a special thank you, Chris and Gary, for leading the charge and very quickly becoming the face of this initiative. And Kurt, always a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you to all.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.